This week on Inside Olympia, Washington's Office of Insurance Commissioner race is open for the first time in nearly a quarter of a century. The candidates to replace longtime Commissioner Mike Kreidler are a pair of state senators, Democrat Patty Kuderer and Republican Phil Fortunato. What are their visions for this office? What are their priorities? And what would they do differently if elected? We'll ask them.
From the TBW studio, it's Inside Olympia with host Austin Jenkins.
And welcome to Inside Olympia. Ballots are arriving in mailboxes and voting is getting underway. In a presidential election year, it is easy to overlook down-ballot races, but one race stands out because for the first time in nearly 25 years, the incumbent is not running. Longtime Washington Insurance Commissioner Mike Kreidler decided not to run for re-election this year. Seeking to replace him are two state senators, both with very different political ideologies and visions for the office, which regulates the insurance industry and advocates for consumers. In our second half, we'll hear from Republican candidate Phil Fortunato, but joining me first is State Senator Patty Kuderer, the Democrat running in this race. Welcome to the program. Good to see you, and we're speaking in a different context than usual, because usually it's in the context of the legislature. Yes. Let's just start with what prompted. I mean, this has been a seat or a position, statewide office, that has been held by Mike Kreidler for 20 plus years. It's unusual because it's now an open seat, but what prompted you to run for this particular office? What interested you? What about your background lends itself to being the state's elected insurance commissioner?
Well, thanks for having me on, Austin. And, you know, I've known about the importance of the office in my role as a trial lawyer, my work for many, many years. And then as a legislator, I've worked directly with folks at the OIC on bills that I've gotten through the legislature. So I knew about the importance of the office for a long, long time. And my motivation was driven primarily by a deep desire to see health care accessible to all Washingtonians. And I've told this before to people, and the story really resonates because I think everybody would like to see access to health care for everyone. You know, my daughter, when she was born many years ago, she was an extreme premature. She was 3 months early. She weighed 1 pound 13 ounces and was in an incubator for 5 months in Children's Hospital. She had 3 surgeries while she was there. And during that time, I was very fortunate. By this time, you know, in my background, I had, as a trial attorney, I have been asked by insurance companies to represent their insureds, and I had also represented clients in insurance claim matters, hundreds of them. So I had that background already. I had also sold property casualty for a short time before I got into law school. So I had a lot of familiarity with insurance and insurance companies and how they worked, and I knew which buttons to push. And I pushed those, and while they paid for my daughter, and all those babies there were $1 million babies, I had to think when I went back to the NICU and saw the other families doing the exact same thing I was, being by their baby's side, watching them struggle to live, that they were doing the same thing to them. And I remember having this epiphany of sorts that, you know, our healthcare, I felt like our healthcare system was morally bankrupt because it was willing to let these little tiny babies die for the sake of profit. And that really flipped a switch in me, and I've been an advocate for equal access to health care ever since. And that's why, and the role of the insurance commissioner is very important in helping shepherd the state toward that goal.
Well, so much of this office is about regulating the industry, deciding whether their rate increases are appropriate or not, and approving them, going after insurance fraudsters and companies that are unlawfully offering insurance in this state. As you think about pairing the book of business for this office, the day-to-day, with sort of the broader question, policy-wise, of access to health care, and sort of pushing an agenda based on your background and experience, how do you balance those two things? How do you see this serving in this role if elected, given that you have sort of maybe some, obviously you got to run the office, but then there's some kind of fundamental or structural changes that you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, as I've said to insurers that I've sat down and spoken with over the past year and a half, you can have a strong consumer advocate in the role and a healthy insurance market. The two are not mutually exclusive. And you're right, it's not just about health care. There's property casualty, there's life insurance, there's disability insurance, there's annuities, there's the whole gamut, pet insurance, as I've pointed out. There's the whole gamut of insurance other than work comp that really is run through the insurance commissioner's office. The statute, and I think the legislators, when they passed the statute, were very forward thinking. They set it up, and you're right, the role of the insurance commissioner is to provide regulation and oversight, right? To regulate and provide oversight of the insurance industry. And they also said that the insurance commissioner is to act in the public interest, and that does mean to be a consumer advocate. You have to have a healthy market, and you're right about fraudsters, because when insurance fraud happens, it's not just harming the companies, it's harming all of us, because that results in our premiums going up. And, I will have absolutely no trouble going after people who commit insurance fraud at all, and recommending that there be criminal charges for that. And I know that it does happen. But I've also seen that there have been times when people felt like they had insurance coverage only to find out that there's going to be an exclusion that's applied to their claim, one that they hadn't really thought about or hadn't understood or didn't really necessarily say what the insurance company said it said. And I think it's really important for us to think about how do we create more transparency within the insurance industry, more communication between insureds and insurers, so that we don't have these misunderstandings. And, I had a bill last session. I had several that passed dealing with insurance, but this one did not. And what it would have done is it would have put consumer contracts, including insurance contracts, in plain language. And I think that would go a long way in helping insureds understand what they're buying and would reduce the potential for what I call the creative interpretation of exclusions.
What are some changes that you would make to this office? Again, it's been run by the same person for a generation. And I realize you're not in there at this point, but do you have a sense of where you would stay the course and where you might change how it's approaching its work?
Well, I think one of the things that I've learned over the years of my employment law work is that in order for you really to do the job right, you need to have a healthy working environment. And I know, I can tell you the companies that get sued the most, and they're the ones that have the attitude that you work for me. And I have an attitude that you work with me. And that's the kind of leadership style that I will bring to the OIC. And I want to make sure that we have the right resources, we have the right people in the right places, and they have access to training that they need in order to do their job. And I know right now there's about 38 vacancies, I think. And that means that we're not hitting on all cylinders for the people of the state, and that's really who we serve. And so that's one of the things that I would change. In terms of policy, I won't be making policy. I'll be suggesting policy where appropriate, and I'll be working collaboratively with the legislature on any insurance bills that they have. But I do view the role of the insurance commissioner to also engage in consumer outreach and consumer education, and to help them understand more about the insurance industry and their policy and what options there are out there for them to reduce their premiums in real time.
Going back to healthcare, what you have advocated, you are an advocate for universal healthcare, universal access. We do now have, obviously, the Federal Affordable Care Act. We have a state health benefit exchange, and we have subsidies as part of that exchange available to a lot of Washingtonians. We also have an individual market where we continue to see double-digit increases in premiums year over year fairly consistently. As you just got done saying, you're not setting policy, but you can influence policy, and you can certainly ask the legislature to make changes to policy. When it comes to access to health insurance, what sorts of change? What do you envision? And what do you imagine advocating for if elected into this role?
Well, the Insurance Commissioner's Office just recently released a report that had 5 recommendations for doing just that. I think that those are appropriate for the legislature to consider. I've reviewed every one of them. I also think that in terms of, the access piece, we have to understand that even with the Affordable Care Act, we still have millions of people who are uninsured and millions more who are underinsured. And right now in our country, medical bills are the #1 reason for bankruptcy. So that's not working. The system's not working. And we created a Universal Health Care Commission. I voted for that bill. And for me, that wasn't just lip service. And I do think that, and we put the insurance commissioner on that commission. And that was very intentional because of the influence and the expertise and the research that office can bring to the table when creating a blueprint for what might work for Washingtonians. But I know too, Austin, that healthcare, it comes at a cost. There's no doubt about it. And that's a big piece that needs to be figured out before we, as we create a blueprint to move in this direction. But it also pays money back to invest in people's health. We know that we actually save money when we do that. And one of the things that I found so interesting, I've been on the individual market. So when I was on the individual market, I was a solo practitioner right before I got in the legislature. And that came as a surprise. I wasn't exactly expecting that at the time either. But be that as it may, $800 roughly a month for me. I get in the legislature, I sign up for the legislature's health plan, and now it's $84 a month. I'm the same person, same things going on, and it's significantly less. Why can't the individual market be treated as all together as one? They're in it as one, as opposed to each person being treated as an individual on the individual market.
Among the recommendations from that report you just mentioned are that the state should consider creating a reinsurance program for the individual and small group health insurance markets, increasing the minimum medical loss ratio standard for commercial health plans, and using hospital global budgeting to pay hospitals a fixed amount for all inpatient and outpatient services provided to a patient population in a given year. Now, those are some specific changes and recommendations embedded in this report to the legislature that may or may not be implemented. What about going to a single payer system in this state? And what would that mean for the insurance industry?
Well, you're not going to get there overnight, that's for sure. It's going to take steps to get there. But every research paper I've read on healthcare says that that's the way to save the most money, is to have a single payer system. And back when my daughter was in the hospital, I met a doctor who was an author. He was not my daughter's doctor, but he was an author. He actually wrote 365 Days. Ronald Glasser was his name. And he happened to be writing on our failed healthcare system at the time, and he hired me. So after my daughter got out of the hospital, I went to work on his writings, and I got to read all about our healthcare system, how it was created by chance. I mean, by a federal law that was incentivizing people to go into World War II to serve in the military. And so employers decided they were going to offer health care as a benefit to keep people here. And it's interesting to me because that is really not a good idea. I mean, if you look at what happened during COVID and the millions of people who lost their health care coverage because they were suddenly without a job, that is not acceptable. And I think, what he was writing on at the time, too, really pointed to a single-payer system. But, single payer is not just like one entity all by itself and that's it. I mean, like in Canada, each province is a single payer. So it's not like you have the federal government, and I honestly don't think that would necessarily work. In the United States, we're so much bigger. I think you'd have to carve it up the country by region, and I think then you might be able to have a federated board with a single-payer system to work that way. But again, that wouldn't be my call.
Right. Would that be something you would be championing, though, in this role?
It would be something I definitely would look into more closely to see how that could work. And I think you're going to be looking at moving toward a system where everyone has access to health care. You're going to be looking at short-term, mid-term, and long-term implementation strategies. So that is because that gives you the ability then to correct, course correct as you go forward in real time, as opposed to putting it all in place at once and having to come back and do an overhaul.
Let me ask you about some of your other priorities that you've laid out in this campaign, including protecting access to reproductive health in the context of Roe v. Wade being overturned. What opportunities do you see in the Office of Insurance Commissioner to protect access? What specifically are you contemplating? What policies, procedures would you be implementing?
Well, the policies have already been passed into law, remember?
By the legislature.
Correct, and I supported all of those policies. It's the insurance commissioner's job to make sure that those laws are followed. That's what I will be doing in the insurance commissioner
And it's
role.
ensuring things like what? Insurance companies covering abortion services?
Correct.
Providing reimbursement for over-the-counter
Correct.
Contraception?
Correct, and also not revealing information that they're not allowed
Data
to reveal.
protection.
Correct.
Do you have a sense at this point of how the insurance industry is complying? Is there an audit that's needed? Does it just sort of keeping a steady hand on this? What's your assessment?
Well, I'm not in there yet, but I definitely think that we need to. The job is to monitor this, right, and to make sure that our laws, our reproductive justice laws that we passed, are being followed by all of the players that fall under the jurisdiction of the OIC. So that would be insurance agents, insurance producers, and the insurers themselves. So that's how that is the role of the insurance commissioner. And you can, like I said, I supported those laws, so you can bet that they will be a priority for me.
I mean, you sponsored some of these laws.
Yes,
you
I
led
did.
on some of it.
Yeah.
A lot of this in the legislature. A proposal that is a part of your platform is to require gun owners to carry liability insurance, something that's not currently required. I can imagine a lot of gun owners might not like that proposal. What are you proposing, and what's the case for it?
Well, the case for it is that we have right now a young person is more likely to die from a gunshot than any other way, and we have about 36% of Washingtonians report that they own a weapon, and we only have roughly a third of them that actually engage in safe storage. This is really about safe storage practices to reduce the number of times that we have accidental shootings, or we have a situation where someone is negligent and leaves a gun out and it's stolen and used in a crime. So this is another way to reduce gun violence in our state. And I also think that with rights come responsibilities, and I just am really surprised that there is this kind of pushback on something that's so common sense. In fact, right now, a lot of there are companies that would actually cover if there is an unintentional shooting that involves negligence of an insured. But I want to make sure that gun owners have that. I think that that's important to know. And I also think an agent would want to know how many weapons you have in your home and the kind. That information would be transmitted to the OIC only in the aggregate. So there would be no identifying information. There would be no, there wouldn't even necessarily be the kind of weapon. But I think that that's important to know for purposes of what the premium's going to be. And do you have safe storage? Are you using smart technology so that your gun can't be fired unless your fingers are on it, et
Just to be
cetera?
clear, this would require an act of the legislature to implement. But do these policies already exist? Would they be a part of your homeowner's insurance? And again, this would be a mandate, correct?
Yeah, yes, it would be a mandate. And
would insurance companies have to?
Some do cover it already, not all. But I think in order to properly insure the risk, you need to know how many weapons are in the home.
Would it be in the context of homeowners insurance or something
Yes,
else? What about
homeowners.
for renters? What about people who
Well,
who don't
renters,
own?
would it be under their renter's insurance?
And some people don't have renters insurance. So.
True.
But the way you're envisioning this is if you owned a firearm, you would be required to have liability insurance, not optional.
Correct.
Has any other state done this? Is there any precedent for
Yes,
this?
New Jersey has done it. I don't know that they did it very well. And San Jose also has a city ordinance that it was modeled after. If you look at the legislation, the proposed legislation, it was one of because I think it's important to establish an incentive, but unfortunately, there was no way to put any teeth into it. And so even if you didn't do it, there's
no penalty.
There's no penalty, but I do think that it raises the awareness, and I think, people you wouldn't be able to call yourself a law-abiding gun owner then, would you? If you didn't have it.
And your argument is that you think that this would incentivize better, safer practices.
I think that it would. I think that
if people knew.
Yeah, if they were more aware of the number of times that we have accidental shootings, the number of times that weapons are stolen when they could have been locked up, right, and used in a crime, I think that more awareness could help us reduce the amount of gun violence that we have.
I can imagine gun owners in many cases more than bristling over the concept of their insurance agent asking them for how many firearms in the home, what types of firearms. We're going to take this down, and we will be reporting this, at least in aggregate, to the insurance commissioner's office in a state that has very strong constitutional protections for gun rights. Mm-hmm. How would you respond to that or address that concern on the part of the gun owner?
Well, like I said, I mean, we've had a gun violence problem in our country for a very long time. And this isn't about taking away someone's guns. This isn't about infringing on someone's rights. It's about adding a responsibility that goes along with that right. And if, we require insurance for people to drive a car, that's not a constitutional right. I understand that. But at the same time, a gun is the only, product, if you will, that if used correctly can kill you. I mean, it's designed to kill. So it seems to me that with that kind of a right comes some real responsibilities. And this, you can even check with your own homeowners if they would cover it, because it really comes down to negligence. But I do think, again, that it could incentivize safe storage and training and whatever other technology is out there that could help keep people safe from gun violence.
We've been talking a little bit about homeowners insurance in some states, California, Florida, in particular, Louisiana. The property casualty insurance market is in trouble. Companies are going out of business. They're pulling out. They're not covering homeowners because of rising costs around wildfires, hurricanes, and much of this is climate related. We've got forest fires here. I think we've seen some pressure already in our homeowners insurance system. As insurance commissioner, what would you be doing to shore that up and not allow what happened in California and Florida and Louisiana happen? In the case of Louisiana, the states had to essentially bail out companies, create state-funded insurance, pretty dire situations.
Yeah, well, the OIC is already working on this issue, so I would continue that effort because I think it's got to be of paramount importance. So it will be a priority once I get into the office because I've heard from folks around the state about, getting non-renewal notices, and you might recall we had one of my bills that passed this last year that gave people a little extra time, 15 extra days, to find alternate coverage. We are not in the same situation as California or Florida. Every state in the country has what's called a FAIR plan, which is a state plan. And it's for people who can't find insurance, property insurance, anyplace else. It is the insurer of last resort, and I intend to keep it that way. And just to give you kind of a perspective on it, California has, roughly 250,000 homes on their FAIR plan. We have like 250. So huge difference. We're not seeing that kind of withdrawal from the market here. It's a hard market around the country. I just had a meeting earlier today with the head of the insurance organization here in the state. And he was saying it's starting to stabilize. You know, it is starting to stabilize. And there's reinsurance issues that go along with the rise in the premiums as well. So it is going to be a focus of mine. I think we need to help, again, it comes down to consumer education and, you know, explaining to folks, giving them strategies for how to remain insurable and to reduce the risk. So it's risk mitigation strategies, hardening communities, whole communities against wildfire issues. And there are organizations that work on this right now, wildfire coalitions around the state that I could see us, you know, actively collaborating with, in addition to the DNR and the next lands commissioner, in how do we, how do we maintain whole communities' insurability while addressing this. But you're absolutely right. It does go back to the issue of climate change. So these things don't exist in a vacuum, and so there are policies across the spectrum that we really need to, you know, the legislature will need to be looking at.
We have just about a minute left. A couple of other issues that are part of your platform are lowering the cost of auto insurance, simplifying appeals of medical claim denials,
Yes.
and firefighter cancer screening. But in the minute we have left, and as people are getting their ballots and thinking about deciding, and again, this seat hasn't been open for a long time, what's your pitch to voters for why they should elect Patty Kuderer as the state's next insurance commissioner?
I only get a minute.
Yeah, sorry. Your closing
Okay.
statement.
It's all right. You know, I would say this. You know, my work has been dedicated to consumer advocacy, both as a lawyer and as a legislator. And that's part of the statute. That's a statutory duty of the insurance commissioner, in addition to having experience in the insurance field. So I'm the one that brings experience to the table. And I also bring a vision for how the insurance commissioner's office can be a resource for people in the state. I intend to make sure that the insurance commissioner's office is consumer-centered and that we have an open-door policy for all stakeholders. And as I'm going to leave you with this comment, as I said, you can have a strong consumer advocate as insurance commissioner and a healthy insurance market at the same time. The two are not mutually exclusive.
Okay. Patty Kuderer, candidate for State Office of Insurance Commissioner. Thanks for coming in to talk about this.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. And when we return, we hear from State Senator Phil Fortunato, who is the Republican running for State Insurance Commissioner. Back after this.
I had to fight for a lot of the resources that I needed, such as counseling and a lot of the post-traumatic stress that comes with such a traumatic event. Every year since, there has been several more instances like mine where wildland firefighters have gotten extremely hurt and even killed.
And welcome back to Inside Olympia. This week we are talking with the candidates for a statewide office that is easily overlooked but plays an important role in the lives of Washington consumers, and that is the Office of Insurance Commissioner. Joining me now is the Republican candidate for that office, State Senator Phil Fortunato. Thanks for being here. Good to see you. And I want to start, as I did with your opponent, by asking you why this office? Why are you running for State Insurance Commissioner? The first time this office has been an open race in over 20 years. What prompted your
Well,
campaign?
one of the things that, as a Republican, we simply cannot allow these executive position races to go uncontested. I mean, the voters of Washington need to at least have an alternative choice. They need to hear different ideas on how they're going to approach, in this case, the insurance office. What's my philosophy? What's my opponent's philosophy? And they can weigh that and then at least make a decision. But when they're both on the same side of the fence, I mean, that's not really giving the voters a choice. So that's one reason why. And plus, it is the number 2 most important race that affects people's wallets. You know, governor being one, veto and taxes. But your insurance rates, whoever gets elected insurance commissioner, people don't realize the power of this office. This office is unique compared to other executive offices in that it is like 80% rulemaking. It's not law. And by that I mean, if you elected me Secretary of State, for example, and I go in there and I say, I want to do this and this and this and this and this, all of that is great, but if you elect me, I have to follow the law. And if I want to do those things, I need to get the legislature to change the law, to enact what I want to do. But the insurance commissioner isn't like that. The insurance commissioner can simply pass rules. And an example is the credit scores. So credit scores you can't use credit scores for low-income people to evaluate your insurance rates.
And this is specifically around auto for the most part.
Right. That was a bill that did not pass the legislature. However, the insurance commissioner instituted that rule or that law by rule and simply implemented it that way. Now, it eventually got overturned in the courts, but that's an example of instituting policy by rule instead of by law. And there is tremendous power in that office to do that.
What is it about your background and experience that you think uniquely qualifies you to be state insurance commissioner?
Well, I mean, the current insurance commissioner was what, an optometrist or ophthalmologist or something, right? So how's that tie in? And it's the legislative experience, how the legislative process works. It is the experience with, in this case, the observation of rulemaking versus law. And what I don't like is I do not believe that the insurance commissioner's office is a policy-making office. It is not a policy office. In other words, the credit scores, using credit scores, that's a policy decision. That's something the legislature should be doing. And what I want to do is return the office back to its roots, which is the number one thing the insurance commissioner is supposed to be doing is be your advocate. So if you have a problem with your insurance company and maybe they're not upholding their policy, you come to the insurance commissioner's office, and the insurance commissioner's job is to be your advocate and to fight for you, okay? And years ago, we actually had to call the insurance commissioner's office on an issue that we had with my previous company, and it was very helpful to get that resolved. But the instituting policy, okay, and is different. So I don't want the insurance commissioner doing that. I want him to be my advocate. And the other thing that they do is review rate increases.
Yes, and approve them.
And so you'll notice that your insurance, he just approved rate increases of 43%. Why is that? Why do you think he approved rate increases of 43%?
Are you talking about health insurance or?
We're talking about insurance in general.
I know the average increase for the health insurance this year was about 10%, double-digit increases. But go ahead. So yes, the insurance commissioner approves. The companies submit their proposed rates. The insurance commissioner reviews them and then says, yes, you can do that or something less than.
So what's the number one reason why insurance companies leave the state? And I jokingly say we're California North, but that's what we are. Everything we're doing is emulating California. So California, for example, is consistently losing insurance companies. Now, if you get your insurance bill, and let's say you get your insurance bill and you go, oh, my car insurance is $2,000. I'm going to shop it around. I'm going to look for somebody cheaper. Well, what happens when there is nobody else cheaper? What happens when you only have one or two different choices?
So what would you do differently? And maybe we can start with, let's break this down a little bit. We were talking about, there's health insurance, there's property casualty, there's automobile, just as a couple, those are the kind of the top line examples, certainly not an exhaustive list. But let's talk about health insurance for a moment. Your opponent is an advocate for universal care, would support a single payer plan ultimately. That would be a policy decision of the legislature, not something the office could do unilaterally. But she wants to expand access to health care and reduce the cost. When it comes to health insurance, if you're the insurance commissioner, how are you going to approach that very fraught market, especially for individuals who are paying out of pocket and seeing year-over-year increases, 10% or more?
You know what? Well, first of all, I can't wait to have the DMV run my health care. That's what you're talking about when you're talking about government health care. And I jokingly say, if Washington went to a single-payer system, where would the Canadians go for health care, right? Everybody knows it doesn't work. And the estimate is $27 billion. And Patty is on record as saying she knows that that would be a payroll tax deduction in order to implement this free health care. And I mean, we already have this with Medicare. We already have this with the VA system. I mean, the VA system, my first 3 sons joined the Marine Corps. They're all vets. Okay, 6 months or 3 months or 4 months to get a dental appointment. I mean, that's what you're looking at and that's why Canadians come to Washington to get health care.
Do you think we should we be moving away though from employer connected or based health care?
Absolutely not. So, but one of the problems I have is the reason that it is beneficial for you to have your employer pay your health care is because it's before tax dollars. So let's say that you have to buy your own insurance. Why do you need to pay for that with before tax dollars or after tax dollars? Why shouldn't that be tax exempt? Okay, so that's a federal issue. So that's one of the things that you can ask the feds to say, hey, you should be looking at this. And insurance, health insurance and things like that should be tax exempt. So, which is the advantage of having your employer do it. But I will say this. I never paid less for health care than when I didn't have insurance. And I tell this story. I go to the doctor. Doc, I got this issue. You need a minor surgery. I looked at him and I said, how much? And he looked at me like I was nuts. And he goes, I don't know. He leaves and goes back. And I goes, well, I guess my fee is $1,800. I go, well, how much if I just pay you cash? I don't know. He leaves, he comes back. He goes, well, I guess $1,400.
Sounds like you're buying a car.
All right, it's $1,400. So he goes, but here's the hospital codes. Here's the anesthesiologist, the operating room. I call up the hospital. How much? $11,000. How much if I pay cash? $7,800. Oh, so now I start calling hospitals, right? The cheapest hospital was Overlake in Bellevue. I said, how much? $7,800. And these numbers are 15 years old now. $7,800. I go, how much if I pay cash? $3,500. Oh, so I find a surgeon at Overlake Hospital. I go to that surgeon, and how much? $1,800, $1,400. But if you do it on Tuesday, I do it upstairs in the private surgery center. It's only $900, and because I don't have to give the hospital a cut. So I get on the elevator. I go upstairs to the private surgery center. How much? $3,200. How much if I pay cash? $2,200. The point of that story is, the total cost was $3,200. I put it all in my Cabela card and got Cabela points. But the price ranged from $3,200 to $22,000. Now, Austin has a premium health insurance plan. So Austin happens to go to the hospital at $22,000. How much is your deductible? Right? If you went to that hospital for $22,000, I mean, I went to the doctor said I need a CT scan. I got a bill for $5,700.
So help me understand how this story fits into what changes, if you're elected insurance commissioner, you would be making to the way we are regulating these companies, the way we are setting their premiums and what they can charge.
The Washington, I think it was Washington Health Authority or something, did an interview with me. And one of the things that they didn't like was high deductible health insurance plans. Oh, look, you got these high deductible plans. People
lower cost, higher deductible.
Right, lower cost, higher deductible, okay? Oh, then people don't go to the doctor. But now, before Obamacare, I was watching TV and a guy at Whole Foods, you got to remember these numbers are 20 years old now, but he said what we do is we give all of our employees a $2,500 catastrophic plan. It pays $0 to $2,500, but after that it pays 100%, and then which cost us $400 a month. And then we give them a $2,500 medical savings account. So a high deductible plan coupled with a medical savings account is the way to go. Now, when you go to the doctor, okay, why do you buy car insurance? You buy car insurance for a catastrophic event. You might get in an accident. You don't buy car insurance to change the oil in your car or get new tires. So why do you expect your insurance plan to pay for your doctor visit or your prescription drug, okay? And remember, you're paying $1,500, $1,600, $1,800 for a premium plan that covers this with a $6,000 or $8,000 deductible with a copay.
So you are identifying what you feel like are flaws in the current setup? You said you don't want to move away from employer-based health insurance, but you clearly see flaws in how we're currently running the health insurance marketplace. And again, you've talked about policy versus legislative policy versus that which is within the domain of the insurance commissioner. Given these kinds of issues you're raising, how do you see in this office changing that?
Well, now, I would be an advocate for high deductible insurance coupled with medical savings account, and I would be promoting that so that people understand how that works. Because remember, your medical savings account is tax-free, right? It's before tax dollars, and if you didn't use that, in the case of Whole Foods, they didn't use the $2,500. They could roll that into the retirement plan. So getting exposure for that and educating people on those issues can help reduce our insurance costs. The other thing that you want to reduce your insurance costs, ironically, is Medicare reimbursement rates. Medicare reimbursement, you got to remember that the entire Medicare system is held up by everybody else paying full price, okay? So when they say Medicare for all, the entire system would collapse and you would have a two-tier medical system. You would have the best doctors leaving that government plan and basically catering to the rich, and then you would have everybody else stuck with whoever was left. So by promoting the high deductible things with the medical savings account, that allows people to make their own decisions and gives them more flexibility. Now, ironically, she wants to do the universal health care, which would require federal government stuff and legislation. But now, because of Obamacare, we would actually have to request a federal waiver in order to allow for the high deductible medical plans and the medical savings account coupled together. There's some of that available now, but I want to get more flexibility in there.
So that would be something where you couldn't do that by fiat, by Office of Insurance Commissioner rulemaking, but you would be advocating for that
Right.
waiver.
And you can do some of that by doing the education, because that's what I have, is I have a medical savings account coupled with the insurance. My insurance rate is lower, my medical savings account is higher, and then when I need stuff, I just pay for it out of the medical savings account.
What about property and casualty insurance? We've seen, you referenced California, Florida, Louisiana, several states are really struggling, seeing a loss of insurance companies offering that product because of natural disasters. We have wildfires here. We see premiums go up. We see companies go out of business or withdraw from the market. What would you do to stabilize and ensure that in this state, where we don't have hurricanes, but we have some of the same challenges, what would you do to make sure that system is intact and strong?
Okay, so the number one reason insurance companies are leaving California is the length of time it takes to get a rate increase approved. Now, in the case of cars, for example, 6-7 years ago, I bought my wife a Ford Explorer. That's not a fancy, super deluxe luxury car. $42,000. When just last year, we bought a new one. $62,000, a 50% increase. Now, some of that is because of Bidenomics, and the inflationary rate and all that stuff. But now you're the insurance company. You need to get a rate increase because of inflation. Okay, so you come to the insurance commissioner's office and you say, hey, I need a rate increase because of inflation. And then the insurance commissioner doesn't do anything. Year goes by, you go back in, you go, hey, I need a rate increase because of this and this and this and this. Insurance commissioner doesn't do anything. Takes more than a year and a half, pushing 2 years. Now he finally does give a rate increase. Okay, and now the insurance company is saying, we need a rate increase because it's going to cost us more money going forward. Cars are going to cost more money, repairs are going to cost more money, et cetera. But we also need to recover the losses that we had from the previous year when you didn't grant us a rate increase. And so now not only are you paying the cost going forward, but this year you're paying for the cost going backwards. And that's why you're getting 30, 40, 50% rate increases on car insurance and property and casualty. The other thing with...
So just to be clear, the policy you were proposing is essentially to allow the rate increases to go into effect immediately. Then the office reviews them, and if the office finds that they were too great, too large, not defensible, then the company would have to do refunds. Is that right?
That's correct. It's called that concept is called file and use, which is instituted by other states, right? Idaho, for example. So Idaho approves rate increases in 30 days, but they have what's called file and use. So that means that the insurance company comes into the insurance commissioner's office and says, here's our proposed rate increase, and they are allowed to use that rate increase day one. Now, in Idaho, what they do is they typically simply wait the 30 days also to make sure that it's in compliance. But
in
if
theory,
it
they
is
could.
not in compliance, I mean, and Liberty Mutual had to issue $42 million in refunds to customers. Now, if you're an insurance company and the state of Washington, the insurance commissioner says, we are telling your insurance company to issue a refund because we think they screwed you, right? That's not good for me for sales. That's not good for my reputation. And so that's why when you have states that are file and use, there's sort of this balance because you're getting rate increases of 6, 7, 8%, a more moderate rate increase because they know that that's going to get approved. But also what happens is insurance companies are telling me, for example, that a couple of years ago, we had a pretty good time that we didn't have any claims. And we would have been able to actually reduce rates, but we didn't want to do that because if we did, we were afraid that we weren't going to be able to get that rate increase back if things went the wrong way.
So if you've talked about one way to stabilize the market from your perspective is make it easier for the companies to be able to raise rates in a timely fashion. The flip side of that is homeowners and drivers are complaining that their insurance rates are going up too much. That's also true in the healthcare front. We've seen, especially in the individual market, it sort of settled down for a little while, but we're back to, on average, I think 9.7% increases in the individual healthcare market this year. What can you do as insurance commissioner to ease the pocketbook pain of the insurance consumer?
That's the file and use thing. Okay, where they're able to increment these reasonable rate increases instead of these big rate increases, and by doing that, they're also able to lower rates if they because there was a couple of times when they wanted to lower rates, but they were afraid they wouldn't get that rate increase back. So the file and use is kind of a big deal, and that would what I want is I want more insurance companies fighting for your business. I want more insurance companies wanting to come to Washington State. More competition leads to lower prices and more flexibility in the marketplace. I want to give them more flexibility. I want to give them the ability to be able to offer you products, maybe a non-standard product that might meet your needs, okay? As opposed to having some policy that they have to implement these things whether you like it or not.
This is on the health insurance side been debated and fought over in the legislature over a number of years around health insurance mandates, what health insurance has to cover and provide in this state if it's going to offer an line of insurance. The argument that you hear from Democrats is that there are services that not everybody will use, but some will use, and that these are, if you start to allow the companies to pick and choose what they're offering, then you are essentially doing a disservice to consumers. What's the flip argument? Why do you not agree with that?
You're the consumer. I want you to be able to pick what you want to pay for. I want you to be able to make that decision. I don't want the state of Washington making that decision, driving up everybody's health care cost. Okay, so if you want a policy that covers A, B, C, and D, then buy a policy that covers A, B, C, and D. If you only want to cover A and B, then that's your decision. That's the difference, is having the state of Washington tell you what you have to get and having you be able to make the decision on what you want to have and what you want to pay for. And that's the difference. And this is the difference between the heavy-handed government regulation approach and the more free market approach, where you are encouraging more competition, more flexibility in plans, and things like that. Now, the file and use thing, you could do that in 31 days. You can walk into the insurance commissioner's office and say, you know what, all these rules, we're not going to do any of those rules. We're going to do something totally different. Publish those new rules, and 30 days later, that's what it is.
Let me go back to property casualty. What if you're in an area that's prone to wildfires and companies are saying, we don't want to insure these houses. The risk is too great.
Yeah, okay. Who manages the forests?
Well, it depends, right?
Right. I mean,
State,
most
the feds,
of it is the Department of Natural
Sometimes
Resources.
it's private companies. Yeah.
Right. But Department of Natural Resources, private companies and things like that. But they're managing the forest more properly than DNR in most cases. But years ago, and I'm trying to remember 5, 6, 7 years ago, whatever it was, there was the DNR petitioned the Department of Ecology for a burn permit because they wanted to burn off the undergrowth, okay, to minimize the effect of a catastrophic fire. So burn off all this fuel that's on the ground, and that minimizes the fire. You do it in a controlled environment. The Department of Ecology would not give them a burn permit for smoke, okay? 2, 3, 4 months later, the entire forest went up and almost encroached all the way to Spokane, right? Because they had all this fuel on the ground. So my question to you is, if the state of Washington is responsible for managing the forests, how come the state of Washington doesn't assume some of the responsibility? And currently there are grants issued by the Department of Natural Resources for you to, in effect, make your property more fire resistant. Cut the forest back away from the house, use fire resistant shingles,
Right.
use fire resistant decking material, things like that. And if you did that, the state of Washington is the only state in the entire union that does not allow that insurance company to give you a discount if you helped fireproof your property, okay? Now, in addition to that, if the state of Washington is partially responsible for these forest fires, the state of Washington should assume some of that responsibility. So my proposal, for example, is to say the state of Washington will assume 20% of the responsibility for your home. So if you, so now...
So in other words, the insurance company then is covering
has
80%. And where would the money for this come from?
Okay, so now, remember, every time there's a forest fire, the governor declares an emergency. As soon as he declares an emergency, you have access to the rainy day fund. So you would be able to, for example, allocate under the rainy day funds, let's say $200 million. So you allocate this $200 million out of the rainy day fund, and let's just say that nothing happens this year. You don't have any losses. That $200 million is still there. It's only going to be used when we actually do have a major fire and we do have some catastrophic events, which, by the way, is what the rainy day fund is there for. So,
just in the couple minutes we have left, I want to ask you about your opponent's proposal to require, and you and she have debated over the years a lot of gun policies in this state. She has a proposal that if elected OIC, she would like the legislature to pass a law requiring gun owners to carry liability insurance. What is your view of that proposal? How would you approach
that's not
things?
exactly what the bill does. What her bill does is say, Austin, do you have guns in your house? If you do have guns in your house, then you need to get $1 million umbrella policy in case Austin shoots somebody in his house. Now, if you accidentally shoot somebody, like you have a gun and you accidentally, maybe your neighbor's over and you accidentally shoot him, that's already covered by your existing homeowners policy. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the $1 million policy is not to protect Austin. It's to protect Austin's victim, right? So a burglar breaks in your house, you shoot this guy, which you are entitled to do if he's committing a felony, breaks into your house, he's not there for doing anything good. You decide to shoot him because you feel threatened. Now that guy now has recourse to come after you and your $1 million policy. That's what it's for. And then she wants a list of your guns sent to the insurance commissioner's office.
She thinks this would incentivize people to be more careful about how they store their guns and help with gun safety.
That's a bunch of nonsense.
I'm going to give you, in the minute we have left, make your case to voters why they should vote for you for insurance commissioner.
So this election is pretty simple. As I mentioned early on, you want to be able to have a choice. You have a choice here. You have heavy regulation, more government, everything on her webpage. Nothing on her webpage will actually reduce your insurance rates. Everything requires more regulation, more of this, more of that, more government interaction. As opposed to my policies, which is get the insurance commissioner's office out of the policymaking realm, focus on being advocates for the consumer, and focus on encouraging more competition in our state. I want more insurance companies fighting to come to the state, as opposed to having burdensome regulations and chasing them out. So more flexibility, more competition, and that leads to lower rates.
Okay. State Senator Phil Fortunato, who is running as a Republican candidate for office of Insurance Commissioner. Thanks for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good to
Pretty
talk
simple
with you.
tagline. You want cheaper insurance? Vote Phil.
And thank you for watching Inside Olympia. We will see you again next week.